The crack of a scaled hand against human skin echoed through the crowded spaceport lounge. Mark Daniels had been looking down at his coffee when he heard it, but his head snapped up instantly at the sound, and at his wife's shocked gasp across the room. Ellie stood with her hand pressed to her reddening cheek, facing a tall, purple-skinned Vexian. The alien's four eyes narrowed with disgust as he loomed over her, mandibles clicking in what everyone at this outpost recognized as laughter. "Watch where you walk, dirt creature," the Vexian hissed. His translator badge made the insult perfectly clear to everyone in the suddenly silent lounge. Mark was already moving, weaving through the crowd of humans and aliens with a focus that surprised even him. He wasn't a fighter. Back on Earth, he'd been a high school science teacher. But right now, none of that mattered. The Vexian Dreth was well known at Outpost Zenith. He was one of the many traitors who believed humans were the weakest species in the galaxy. Soft-skinned, emotionally, unpredictable and unworthy of the space they'd been generously given in the Galactic Alliance. "Apologize to my wife," Mark said, his voice steadier than his racing heart as he positioned himself between Ellie and the alien. The Vexian's upper eyes blinked in surprise before all four narrowed again. "Your mate should apologize to me. She contaminated my trading robes with her touch." Mark felt Ellie's hand on his arm. "It's okay," she whispered. "Let's just go." But Mark couldn't move. 3 months on this outpost, and every day they'd endured sideways looks, whispered comments, and accidental shoving from aliens who viewed humans as nothing more than amusing pets at best, vermin at worst. "She bumped into you accidentally," Mark said. "You struck her deliberately. On our world, that's called assault." The Vexian made a gurgling sound that his translator couldn't process, probably some curse in his native language. "Your world," Dreth said, towering over Mark by at least 2 feet. "Your primitive mudball isn't here to protect you, human. There are no human laws in space." The lounge had become completely silent. Mark noted that several other Vexians had moved closer, backing up their fellow. He also saw the station's security officer, a 4-armed Palaxian named Zorna, watching with interest but making no move to intervene. "You're right," Mark said, surprising the alien with his agreement. "Earth isn't here, but I am." Dreth's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Vexian equivalent of derisive laughter. "And what will you do, soft one? Fight me? I could break you with one hand." Mark knew this was true. Physically, humans were outmatched by many species in the Alliance. The Vexians in particular had exoskeletons that could withstand impacts that would shatter human bones. "No," Mark said. "I challenge you to the right of understanding." A ripple of surprised whistles and clicks spread through the alien onlookers. The right of understanding was an ancient Alliance custom that predated humanity's arrival in galactic society. Any sentient being could invoke it when they felt disrespected or misunderstood by another species. Dreth's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of confusion. "You invoke ancient law against me? For a simple correction of your mate's behavior?" "I do," Mark said firmly. Ellie squeezed his arm harder. "Mark, what are you doing?" she whispered. "You don't know what this means." But he did. In the 3 months they'd been on Outpost Zenith, Mark had spent countless hours in the station's knowledge banks, learning everything he could about Alliance customs and laws. As Earth's newest and most insignificant member, humans needed every advantage they could get. "The right demands we each demonstrate our species' greatest strength," Mark continued. "If I win, you acknowledge humans as equals, and you never touch my wife or any human again." The Vexian's mandibles clicked slowly as he considered. Refusing the right would bring shame to his entire trading clan. "I accept," Dreth said finally. "Tomorrow in the Central Plaza, I will show all why Vexians are superior and why humans should know their place." After the alien stalked away with his companions, Ellie turned to Mark with worry in her eyes. "What have you done? Vexians are known for their strength and battle skills." Mark led her away from the curious stares of the other patrons. "Trust me, I'm not going to fight him. Not physically, anyway." The next day, half the outpost gathered in the Central Plaza. Word had spread quickly about the human who dared challenge. A Vexian Dreth arrived in ceremonial armor that accentuated his already impressive frame. Metallic plates protected his chest and limbs, and ceremonial paint decorated his purple face. Mark wore his normal jumpsuit. He carried nothing except a small box. Zorna, the Palaxian security officer, stepped forward as the official witness. The challenged has chosen the test of strength, she announced, gesturing to Dreth. The challenger has chosen the test of... She looked at her datapad with confusion. Adaptation. The rite of understanding begins now. Dreth moved to the center of the plaza where several large metal cubes had been placed. With a dramatic flourish, he lifted the first, weighing at least 500 pounds, over his head with one hand. The crowd of Vexians cheered. He proceeded to lift all 5 cubes simultaneously, balancing them in a towering stack that showcased Vexian strength and balance. When he finished, he turned to Mark with smug confidence. Strength is ultimate, Dreth declared. Without it, all other qualities are meaningless. Your turn, human, to embarrass yourself. Mark stepped forward, opening his small box. From it, he removed what looked like 2 simple metal bands. The greatest human strength isn't in our muscles, Mark said, his voice carrying across the plaza. It's in our adaptation. He slipped the bands over his wrists and pressed a small button on each. Immediately, a shimmer of energy surrounded his hands and forearms. When we first arrived here, many of you mocked us for our physical weakness, Mark continued. So I studied, I learned, I adapted. With those words, Mark walked to Dreth's stack of metal cubes. He placed his hands on the bottom cube and, to everyone's astonishment, lifted the entire stack with apparent ease. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Mark carefully set the cubes down and turned to face the astounded Vexian. These are gravity manipulators, he explained, holding up his wrists. I designed them by combining principles from your own propulsion systems with Palaxian force field technology. They create a localized anti-gravity field that makes heavy objects feel nearly weightless to me. Dreth's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in confusion. You cheated. Zorna stepped forward. He did not. The test was adaptation, which he has demonstrated. The rite of understanding has no rules against technology. But using tools is not a natural strength, Dreth protested. Mark smiled. For humans, it is our natural strength. We've survived on Earth not because we were the strongest, fastest, or most resilient creatures. We survived and thrived because we observe, learn, and adapt. When we couldn't run as fast as predators, we built spears. When we couldn't fly, we built airplanes. When space was unreachable, we built rockets. He looked around at the gathering of aliens, meeting their curious eyes, stalks, and sensory organs. Humans may seem weak to you, but give us a problem, and we'll find a solution. Give us a barrier, and we'll find a way through, around, or over it. Mark turned back to Dreth. You struck my wife because you thought humans were beneath you. But we're not beneath anyone. We're different, yes. Physically weaker than Vexians, certainly, but we belong in the Alliance as much as any species. For several moments, silence hung in the air. Then Zorna raised 2 of her 4 arms. The rite of understanding is complete. The challenger has demonstrated his species' strength. Does the challenged acknowledge this strength? Dreth's mandibles worked silently for a moment. Then, with visible difficulty, he bowed his head slightly. The human has demonstrated unexpected resourcefulness. I acknowledge this strength. As the crowd began to disperse, Dreth approached Mark. Your adaptation is impressive, he admitted grudgingly. But machines can fail. What then? Mark removed the bands and placed them back in his box. Then we build better machines. Or find another solution entirely. That's the point, Dreth. Humans never stop adapting. The Vexian studied Mark with all 4 eyes. Perhaps there is more to learn about humans than I thought. Mark nodded. There's always more to learn about each other. That's why it's called the rite of understanding, not the rite of victory. As Dreth walked away, Ellie appeared at Mark's side, sliding her hand into his. That, she said with pride in her voice, is why I married a science teacher. Mark smiled. watching as a group of curious alien children examined his gravity manipulator bands with wonder in their many eyes. In their fascination, he saw the future, a future where humanity's greatest strength wasn't in conquering the stars, but in teaching them how to look at old problems in new ways.